Hey everyone, we're here for the latest edition of our Fabricator blog, and today I have with me Nate Bowman, weld scientist, and Rush Kane, Kane Kid, and we're here to talk about one of their latest and greatest endeavors.
Me and Nate have joined forces and came together to deliver some new resources to the industry.
We realized that the industry needed better welding education.
Weld Labs is continuing education for the modern welder.
We are the kind of Swiss Army knife of welding solutions.
We're more focused on the learning side and being able to correlate the techniques and the science together. They really need to mesh and blend, and with Weld Labs, we can come in and we can bridge that gap.
It's like we want people to learn on accident. We're not trying to cram a bunch of information down people's throats. We just want to get people excited about welding.
Because the end goal is we want them to be a better welder.
What was the genesis of this Weld Lab project?
Yeah, last FABTECH in Chicago, me and Nate were talking about some of the things that we thought would be cool to, as far as providing an alternative form of education, some more in person and working with people. And then that's when we got together, talked about it more, and decided to start Weld Labs.
Let's go even back farther than this. How did you guys first meet?
At FABTECH.
Yeah,
At FABTECH. That's actually where I met you the first time as well. At FABTECH, we all FABTECH, I think, is kind of this there's something that happens at FABTECH when you get a bunch of people that are passionate about welding and fabricating, all in the same space.
Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of at the core of what we wanted to do with Weld Labs is, almost selfishly, we really wanted to take and figure out a way to do this, hang out with more welding people that were passionate about welding and like-minded, and figure out ways that Rush and I could hang out more often. And then also, we've reached a point in our career where, where we do a lot of stuff and we work on a lot of projects, but we don't always necessarily have a lot of opportunities to put the things that we have learned into practice. You probably kind of feel the same way sometimes. You have skills and you have welding skills, but it's not like you weld 60 hours a week like you used to. When you kind of come up through the game and you're putting your time in, you're building all these skills. So, you know what I mean? You still weld 60 hours a week, or you still weld every day?
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I weld a ton.
I wish I could, but for
I
me,
can't show any of it, which is kind of in today's day and age, if you can't post it on Instagram, did it really happen? Did you really do it?
Yeah. And I deal with a lot of the same stuff. My day job, I work as the director of welding optimization and education for a very large regional welding supply company. So if I have to go in and do a training or solve a welding problem and stuff, if I'm doing one of these, what's up, everybody? I'm out here at this shop and they just had a weld failure, probably not,
These guys don't know what they're doing and I'm swooping in to make everything right.
Yeah. And that's not, so I have to kind of be very mindful about what I shoot. It's already enough showing up in the welding rig and with all the I walked in, I have a Patagonia welding hood bag, and people are oh, hey, we really decided that it would be awesome if we could take the things that we like to do and figure out a way to do them more often. A lot of times, I was talking to some other people and they're hey, what are some of the really advanced things that you guys talk about as Weld Labs and weld science? And it's this isn't an advanced welding course. This is the basics. And this is the part that I think a lot of people miss. Everybody wants to teach technique. Everybody has their own technique. And that's a great, it's a great thing to pass on. But, a lot of schools and a lot of places are just missing the basics, weld prep, understanding how to set a machine, how to select a welding, the correct welding process.
Everyone wants to run before they can walk these days.
Yeah.
You have to have that basis to build on, or you're building a house on sand, basically.
Yeah. So that's kind of where it started. I mean, we're at FABTECH, we have a good time. We meet, other people that are like-minded, and we're like, man, this is so cool. I wish we could do this more often. How do we do this more often? We should make a business where we go out and do continuing education. We pass on what we know to people that need it the most. And that's kind of what leads us into where we're starting out with high schools and high school students and community colleges and that type of thing, like young kids going into the industry, starting them with a really, really solid foundation, just setting a good example for them, and then being able to be there for them as a resource or as a mentor from the get-go.
Right.
I don't know what your welding upbringing was like, but typically guys will have, that mentor in a shop or something like that. And they might be that old salty guy that, nobody necessarily gets along with, and he might pass on some information that he misheard or something like that. And then now you got people running around thinking one thing because that's the way that they learned or whatever. So that's really what this is about, is like getting good information in the hands of people that can use it. And also selfishly, we want to hang out and do cool welding stuff.
Heck yeah. I'm all about that. There's so many things that I've been told in my career, like that as an apprentice listening to journeyman, they would tell me and I'd be like, oh, that must be true. And then like 7 years later, I'm like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. And I've been repeating it to other people. Like you can't do this downhill, or you can't do that unless do anything. You just got to come up with the right procedure for it.
You can literally do whatever you want as an inspector. That's absolutely. Like when you cut, like that's one of the things that I show people how to do, show people how to cut open their own welds. Like that's something I want to leave behind with these students and these teachers, like how to do fillet weld break tests and how to do macro etches. Yeah. Because you don't need me anymore. You can make a weld with those settings, write those settings down, cut it open and be like, ooh, I need to make a change, make a weld, look at it again. All right, we're closer or we're further away. Yep. Like the knob needs to go in the other direction, or whatever. That kind of stuff is super important. Again, just the basics.
How have either people found you or you found the groups to go work with so far? Like, how's that worked out?
We went and met like with Arc Labs high school welding competition. And we got in touch just through Instagram and social media is where that relationship initiated. And then
that's in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Texas High School Welding Series had a big welding competition that was hosted at the Arc Labs facility in Houston. So we got invited by the guy that runs Arc Labs to come down and say hello to some people and be a part of the event. That was kind of that was one recent thing that we did. And then Rush has some relationships with high school instructors, and I do as well, where on social media we'll have people that'll just kind of continuously reach out to us with good questions. That's like, I think you're like where we really need to start is we're not interested in necessarily like trying to sell anyone on the idea that you need to hire us or have us out. If you don't think that it's a good idea already, then we're not going to try and convince you that that's like what you need to do. What the things that we show people are, like we said, the basics. And oftentimes that's kind of almost insulting to some people that like, hey, we're here to teach you the basics, but like I'm not here to argue with people and tell people that like, hey, they need to hire us or they need to do anything with us. But a high school teacher, a community college teacher that doesn't necessarily have the funding or the resources to get continuing education or take a class or even really know where to go, or maybe they can't take time off of work or off of school because of other scheduling or whatever. That's the cool part about Weld Labs. This first year, Lincoln Electric is sponsoring us to visit 6 schools. They're covering the entire cost, trip, travel.
What's the territory look like? Are you going to like across the country, or are you staying?
New Hampshire, New York, Illinois. Probably we'll do something else in Texas. We haven't picked all of our slots yet, but then another one in Utah as well with an instructor that Rush and I both kind of know mutually. We don't know for sure that we're going to be able to do 6 school visits every single year. Maybe if we plan them out like a year ahead of time, where we can hit them in like January, February, March, we got approval to do this, and we're working through all the logistics of kind of getting this thing up and running. I mean, Weld Labs is brand new. We started in what?
Yeah, it's probably November.
Yeah.
I remember talking to you guys about it at FABTECH and was just like, yeah, that is awesome. That's a killer idea. And
we just like had the idea and we're like, how do we do this? And we just did it.
Like we have a deep passion for it.
It's crazy now being like been doing this for like 21 years now, something like that. And I still think of myself as like the kid that's an apprentice that's super excited about laying beads. And we interviewed a girl named Amaret earlier this week, and she's doing stuff with NASA, like space welding, but she's only been welding for a couple of years. And I love that. I think I even had it as a line in my website as like part of my bio for years. Like the second I struck an arc, I was hooked. That was it. And she said the same thing. And that's my favorite thing is when somebody says that and you like look at their eyes and there's that like gleam in their eyes that for some people it's different. And that's one of the other reasons, like trying to educate people obviously on what to expect as far as, pay and benefits and things like that. I want people to go into it knowing that, you might not become rich, but if it's something you like doing, you're going to really dig it because it's not just a regular job for the people who are really passionate about it. It's something way more, way deeper than that.
It's like a foundation, welding's the foundation for, I think, what all three of us do. I mean, we're all three completely different people, me, you, and Rush. And we've all been doing this for about the same time. Like I've been doing this for about, 15 to 20 years. I don't even know. Like I've been welding since high school. Rush is the same way. We all do different things now. I would love to be able to weld more often, but now I work in welding R&D and research and
look at the doors that it opens. Welding, it's like when Instagram first started, there was kind of this joke like that, okay, of all those guys that started off being welders, what are they doing now? But it's because of welding. Like welding opened the door. It opened, it introduced people to a community. And it also, there's something about it that it's kind of, I don't know, it's like a gateway drug or something.
Yeah,
like
it is.
You get your taste and then it's like you can go in all these different directions with it. And like that's one of the great things. And you're talking about wanting to start people with the basics. And that's one of the things that, like, with all my workshops that I do, that's my favorite thing is you start off with like something as basic as how to assemble a TIG torch in the right order, because if you don't, the collet gets torn up or the tungsten slides out and you get, a bad seal or something. But it's like this most simplest thing, but welding is troubleshooting. And so it all goes back to like, you have to know that 2 + 2 = 4 before you can go on to doing more advanced things, whether it's setting up a MIG machine, like just putting the wire in right or whatever, like that those are things that you have to know before you can go off to the next thing.
We see a lot of that in the industry where welding instruction is often like you go in the booth and you just twist the knobs until you make it work. And that's just not like
the shop that I went into. They were trying to use 95.5 gas for everything. They were trying to short arc with it. Yeah. No wonder you guys are calling somebody to help you with your welds, because you're not even like, that is such a basic thing. But it's meeting people with where they're at. And that's one of the things I loved about that job particularly is I'm a factory rat. Like all of us are just like shop guys. And I think that sometimes people don't like being told that they need to do something better. But if you build that relationship first and let them know that you're them, like you are who they are, and you've been through what they've been through, and you've had the same issues and had to overcome them, that helps a lot, as opposed to, I think we all know people who would come in and be like, hey, listen, this is how you do it. I've always done it this way. I've never been wrong. Let's go. And you really don't meet people on their level by doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the core of one of the things that's like, I still look at Rush like he's like a welding celebrity, like we're friends, we hang out all the time, but I still see you like weld and I'm just like, oh boy, like this dude is like super good. But at the core of like what both, like all three of us have in common, we're all welders and we all take pride in the work that we do. And when I go into a shop, I mean, I worked for Airgas. I don't usually talk about Airgas very much, but I worked for Airgas for a while. And the guy that I worked for, and this is like kind of the first time Rush ever met me, I was in like Dockers and a shirt tucked in and all this other stuff. Not who I am. You know, I would go into a shop to solve a problem, knowing not what I know now, but partially what I know now, trying to do the job that I do now on a daily basis, but in Dockers and a dress shirt or whatever. And you just look like an asshole. And that's, you know, you hit on a really good point. Like, you have to meet welders where they are. I think that, you know, trying to be, you know, since we're these like whatever celebrity welders, whatever the hell you want to call us, we're just regular people that like welding, and we want to come out and hang out and do cool welding stuff with you. You know, the approach to going in and being at a school, I mean, the questions are going to come in like rapid fire, like, hey, we tried short circuiting with 95.5, like, and I could be like, yeah, you really need, you know, maybe 20% CO2, you could probably get away with it, but it's really going to run like crap. You should probably either set up a designated machine for short circuit. You should always use 75-25 or whatever. You know what I mean? You got to give them some examples. You can't just be like, oh, don't ever do that and then leave. Right. They're like, well, what's the solution? Why? Welders want to know why. And that's really what it's all about for us too. Like, I mean, I don't know if I would say I want to be like the king of why with welding, but you know, I don't know a lot of other people
have a name for it. So
welding waveforms and stuff like that. I got that hyperfill system the other day, and I couldn't wait to like hook my computer to it and look at the waveform so I could see what the pulse waveform was, because I wanted to know what the peak in background amperage was. I'm just curious, like what is it? Like how many amps is it? You know, it's like 700, by the way, for 035, which is sick. We'll talk about packing a punch, but I don't know. I'm just a welding nerd, and I like sharing that with people. And if we have an opportunity to do like this or this times however many people, like, we want to do it. You know, Rush seems pretty quiet, but definitely matches my level of being stoked about welding, especially like when we're in person and we're there. We were talking about this the other day. Whenever him and I work together and it's just us working together, it's like being like working on something and you like reach for something, they're handing you the tool that you need. Right. You know, like we both work that way.
Speaking the same language.
Just like, yeah, very like readily supplemental to like the environment. Like when we're working together, it's like really fun.
This is a selfish way for us to be able to do that.
Right on. Well, you put together a pretty rad trailer and for traveling. Now, are you going to drive everywhere? Are you going to fly in and do stuff? Or
okay, let's see. A couple things. One, the stuff that we're trying to teach, the more advanced stuff, process improvement, that kind of thing, is not part of welding culture. It's just not. So we need to start at the beginning. So that's why we're starting with going to these high schools, introducing them to the basics, but then also being able to say, hey, just so you know, there's advanced process equipment out there by all these different companies that make all these different advanced process machines. Quit trying to buy the $3,000 to $5,000 220 amp welder. That's not the best machine, no matter what your favorite influencer says. There are much, much better, more advanced process of pieces of equipment than what a lot of people post. I mean, you work in, you know, you do real welding. Like real welding is over 200 amps. I mean, and these are, you know, much more industrial machines and things like that. So I think introducing this generation to that technology,
it's becoming more accessible too. Like I have a machine that does pulse in my garage now. Like that wasn't a thing 10 years ago, you know, like something you can run on 220 and lay down some, you know, hefty beads and put some really thick stuff together. Oh crap. Sorry. I just got a wire wheel on my finger. That's always awesome. But like
shop, it's not a set.
Yeah, I know, right? This is actually your real tools.
Yeah, we want to focus on just, you know, having all the advanced stuff in the trailer sick, but not every student, not every shop, not every high school or community college is going to have a, you know, massive advanced process equipment. So
very advanced and like very modern.
Yeah.
Like in there, it's like, it's the most like up to date, like
so many shops and schools are stuck in whatever era they were started in. So if they were started in 1995, they have all stuff that was like really cool in 1995. I think welders sometimes are the same in some of these, whether it's a school or a company. Whereas they came in and they learned how to weld in 1983. So that's, I remember walking into walking into a place and a bunch of the old timers are like, why are you cleaning that aluminum? The machine cleans it for you. Like, you don't have to do that. Like,
okay. Does it?
I see where we're at here. So. Yeah. And then they're the same people who are like, how come your welds look like that? And mine, like, I don't know what to tell you at this point.
We've hit on this before, but like, that was probably, when Rush came out, like right after we started Weld Labs, and we spent, I don't know, like a week together, just hanging out, welding till 2 or 3 or even later in the morning, just out in the lab, just like running beads. He would weld one, I would weld one, he would weld one, I would weld one.
You need to be just, like, have your own like buddy cop movie or something. Like, you're like the other guys with
basically, we're definitely the other guys for sure.
Like scramble some settings, like see how they turn out. Like, it was fun.
But doing that, one of the things I picked up from Rush is his level of prep is insane. Like, I thought that I did pretty good prep, but like the tools that you use, the process, that whole like prep game is, people ask, it's like, well, how do you know what I mean? Like, how do you get those welds to look that good? And it's like welding and cooking are a lot alike. If you start with really good ingredients and you have sharp knives and a great oven and a great pan and everything from beginning to end, you can have this much more like refined result.
Like welding on stainless, and like guys are welding on mirror finish stainless. That's just something I've never done, but like that, starting with that kind of prep versus like, I'm just going to wire wheel this and go at it. Like, it's a totally different product at the end.
It's like one of those metals that looks clean. If you look at it, you're like, oh, it's clean, like wipe it off. But you still have that, depends on like what it's exposed to in its environment. And you don't really see that. You don't see the surface oxide and like what it is. You would see it on carbon steel. If it was like painted orange, you would know like right away. On stainless and aluminum, it's just like one of those things that you kind of, it's like an acquired eye, I guess, like to like see it. And then and as part of that prep of, I think what we're getting into with that, as far we like geek out and just dive into it. That's my favorite thing about FABTECH, is hanging out with you guys and being able just to geek out about stuff. Because like, even very rarely, even at work, do guys want to really like go into the nuts and bolts and the finer points of what we do. So when you find somebody like that, it's inspirational, and it kind of helps push each other to reach new heights. When you're able to bounce ideas or bounce settings, or like, you trust the person that they know what they're talking about, that's definitely a motivator.
I mean, I think there's a lot of pride, that welders carry. I remember like in the early days of Instagram, like you wouldn't follow anyone, you know what I mean? Like, and it just like, you'd get like a like from Welder Assassin. You'd be like, oh yeah, like, all right, doing the right thing, like trying to get that perfect 7018 slag peeler, or whatever. I remember that was the first time, like back like in the early days, and watching you do freehand weaves and stuff, and then just sitting there with like plate after plate after plate, just like, okay, like, how do I get this down? How do I get this down? And, we talk about this all the time. I mean, think about how far TIG welding has come in the past 10 years. Everybody's laying dimes. Everybody's doing weaves now.
All the welding companies are now putting gas lenses with their torches. That didn't happen 5 years ago. That didn't happen 10 years ago. 15 years ago, people were like, what the heck is that you're using?
What, you take that out of the sink?
Yeah. Or like, oh, that's how your welds look that good. And it's like,
oh, it's the gas lens.
Yeah. That, sure, go buy it and you'll be able to weld too. But yeah, like just little advances like that, or just in the companies making specialty products, which is like, it's kind of crazy. Like, the basics have always been fine for me, but it's really nice for people who are doing, really niche things, that there's something out there that's made to do whatever you want to do, whether it's you're welding around a corner in a pipe and you want to bend the tungsten, or, I don't know, there's something out there for everybody at this point.
yeah, just haven't like exposing that, I think, to the next generation of welders the best way that we can. And just be like a voice for them. Hey, like, don't get caught in this gimmick, pay more attention to this stuff, follow these people. No, that's not, you know, that $1,000 welder that does everything is probably not a good idea, you know, like that kind of stuff. For a high school student or community college student, somebody just getting into the industry, they'll see people like us on social media with a big following and for some reason feel like we're unreachable or whatever, but it's not like that for, you know, I would say like any of us. Like if somebody sent you a message, and especially something, I try to be as good as I can. Personally, like I've answered every single message that anybody's sent me, and I'm going to do it as long as I can. I don't have as many followers as either of you guys, so that's also part of it too.
I used to be like that, and then it gets like, I mean, yeah, it's a whole nother rabbit hole. Like if somebody has a question and it's like, okay, this person put thought into this question.
Oh yeah.
As opposed to like, hey, what's your setting for this? Like, you know, I spend more time with someone who's like, okay, they crafted an actual, they have an issue, they have a specific issue, and I'll spend time because I never want to be the person who's replying with just like, you know, a one sentence thing. Like I want to put thought into it, and that becomes a little bit complicated. As the messages grow. But
I get questions about settings a lot, and that's why I have my cheat sheet. Like I have a MIG welding cheat sheet. All the welding qualifications that I've done, like I've come up with over the past several years. Like it's right on my Instagram.
A couple of months ago when I was working at this one shop that was trying to dial in some of their stuff.
I was at a shop yesterday. Guy works like nights and like a weird schedule and stuff. And we couldn't figure out a way during the week to meet up. So I was like, yeah, I'd come in on Saturday or Sunday. Like, I don't care. Come in and get his machine. I have not seen a machine that was so far off. It's like, the voltage was off by like 10 volts.
From what the readout was to what it was actually
10 volts. It was 10 volts higher than what the readout was saying. 10 volts. And it was probably even higher than that because they had about 50 foot. It was like a 300 amp Miller power supply with a 74 feeder, or you know what I'm talking about? The one that has like just the wire feed speed knob on the front.
Yep.
Just do an 035 wants to just do short circuit, right? But they have the feeder on the top, the power supply, and then they have the ground just wound up, 50 foot of cable wound up, and then the ground clamp hooked up, and then 50 foot of cable that goes up to the feeder.
That's creating some energy.
Yeah, I'm like, let's cut these down to 15 feet each.
Yeah.
All you guys need to do, and I'm like, and if you want to make some extensions or something like that, throw some lugs on here or whatever. But
which is like creating a force field that'd be hard to walk through.
Yeah, that much. Like creating. He's like, yeah, the machine gets really hot. I'm like, I bet it does, dude. You're like 2 like induction fields you're creating like right next to the machine. So, and then on top of that, the voltage was off. When we cut those things down, I took a meter and went from the lug on the inside of the feeder to the table, and we welded. And I was like, dude, this voltage is definitely way off. And we welded with it, and it was like, yeah, 10 plus volts off. But like that kind of stuff, you know, that can happen in the industry. And if you're thinking to yourself, hey, I know that this runs at 19.6 volts, and you set it at 19.6 volts and it's like nuclear, you're like, something's up here, you know?
You have to be able to adjust it to your, even like when you don't have that big of a variance. As small of a variance is how, like people, when they're MIG welding, they run at different speeds and they run different ways. And it's like, you need to be able to set up the machine for you. So just knowing that, okay, here's an ideal setting, or the, what do they call default, it? The auto flow or whatever default. But depending on how fast you move on your situation, like being able to dial that in for your specific needs is pretty important. And that comes to that, like, you have a machine that's way off, well, at least you can dial it in to get it to where it's usable.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, knowing how things are supposed to be running and whatnot.
Yeah. I always tell people, like, think about, like, voltage is like arbitrary. It's voltage is measured at the lugs, like on the front of the machine. So by the time that current makes a complete loop back to the machine, what is in the way of that whole thing? If you have a ground, you know, have it grounded to the floor and to a strap that goes across the floor to the table, and then you're welding on another table that's like has another ground strap that goes across that. It's like the current is traveling through all of those things.
Exactly.
To get to where it is. Like it's not going to start nice and crispy.
Why is my ground on fire? I don't understand.
Oh yeah. If your ground is
funny.
hot, yeah. If your ground gets hot or ever gets hot, like you need to replace it or like figure out that situation. The ground is probably, I don't know. I mean, as far as
what we do is troubleshooting, like that's so much of it is, and I think that even with what you guys are doing, that's a big part of it is showing people, like I said, to me, it's always problem solving with welding. And that's a big part of it is understanding like, okay, this is happening. Why is this happening? And tracking down that even to the most basic thing, whether it's a ground or,
I'll show you.
You've got, a bunch of crap in your cup that you're not cleaning out and it's arcing out or whatever. Like there's all these.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite tool that I use all the time, like is as far as like diagnosing welding problems. This is a CM275 digital multimeter clamp meter, but it has a thermal camera in it. It's from FLIR.
You can see hot spots.
Yeah, basically, like if you look at when Rush and I come out on site and we're at a school or a business or whatever, typically I'll run around a shop with this thing and shoot all the lugs, all the grounds, and all the connections. And if there's a hot spot in there, how are you going to know about it unless you're putting your hand on it? And you could see some discoloration. You might notice it's loose or be like, oh yeah, that got hot a couple times. Well, when things get hot, it reduces the amount of voltage. So if you set your machine, you start welding, right? And now you're building up resistance in your system. Well, now you're like, you would agree that a half a volt you would notice. You would notice. So if your ground clamp's starting to get hot and you're losing a volt and you're supposed to be at 19, now you're 18, now you're at 17 and a half. And then you're like, oh, I got to turn this thing up. So you turn it up 1.5 volts. Now it's at 21 and a half. Then you go to lunch, you come back, the machine's cooled off, everything's cooled off. You go to strike an arc again. It's like, whoa, this is way too hot. You turn it back down and around and round and round and round it goes.
But being in tune with that is where I think you get to the next level, which is where we're trying to get people to where, like when you're going in and talking to people about this is like, okay, if there's something weird, don't just keep pushing it down the line, like figure it out. There was, I was doing certification. I was getting certified for doing aluminum pults. I was down at Lima where they build the, they actually have the Abrams production facility, but that's where we go down and we do our certifications. And I was just pulse welding aluminum for the first time. It kept jacking up. Like the wire wasn't feeding right. I was having all kinds of issues. And the instructor was like, well, try a different machine. I'm like, no, it's me. It's gotta be me. Like there's something like that I'm doing wrong. And I kept butting my head. And finally I'm like, all right, I'm going to go try this other machine, having the same issue. So I'm like, clearly it's me. I changed the liner. I like going through all the adjustments I can do, cleaning the gun literally after every pass. And I'm like, these guns are getting really hot. So he ended up having maintenance guys come down. Both the coolant lines were plugged in both machines. So neither gun was getting water cooled like it was supposed to be. So they were both getting hot. Just weird coincidence. Both these machines both had the same issue, but how many times have they been being used and people just aren't in tune to like, why is this gun getting a little hotter than it should be? And he came up to me, he's like, dude, you just saved me so much money by figuring that out before we blew those guns up. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I run into things like that all the time where people are just like, they're kind of used to running something a certain way. And you got to be in tune with the machine and the process. Anything else you guys want to add about this?
It's like really fun and exciting to get out there and like excite the next generation that's coming into this industry. Cause it's been something that's really exciting to, I think all of us right here.
It's real simple, really, like everybody's like, oh man, what is Weld Labs? Is this really, and we're like, no, we're just going to show up and do cool welding stuff with people and answer questions. That's the goal.
Just a couple of guys going around and playing with fire.
Pretty much.
Awesome. Right on, guys. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I always have a blast talking to you guys.
Likewise.
So